People are wondering that if there's God, why doesn't God just say that there's God? There's so much chaos that comes out of it. There's this huge, healthy debate about whether there's even the existence, whether God even exists. And why is that useful to have that be the starting point? Shouldn't we all just know there is God and that now we can move forward to the more important things? Why doesn't God, if he's got all the resources in the universe, just put a little of that into some, like a billboard campaign or something to say, I'm here, now here's what you should go do? Well, that question actually presupposes the affirmative answer to another question that we rarely ever think to ask. And we want to back up this episode and look at that one, which is this. Pardon me. Is getting everyone to know that he exists really valuable to God? Because what Swedenborg asserts, and what we're going to assert tonight, is that it's actually only helpful to God to have you know that he exists if it happens in the right order. That actually just forcing it to happen could cause more problems than good, because what divine providence is trying to do, the guidance of the divine in our lives most strenuously, is not to convince us that he exists, but it's really all about this: changing the will in freedom. And that may sound cryptic and strange. Swedenborg says there are two main parts of us. He calls them the intellect and the will, roughly equivalent to our thoughts and our feelings. And he says what really matters is to change this. And if we don't change this, changing this can actually backfire. So we're going to show you exactly why God doesn't just prove he exists. In this episode, we're going to start by looking at how the machinery could get messed up. You know that saying, a wrench in the works? It's about putting something into a machine that doesn't belong in that part of the machine, or doesn't even belong in the machine at all. There's similar risks involved with just throwing huge concepts into the human mind. Swedenborg asserts that if you introduce a miracle or some kind of undeniable supernatural-esque communication of knowledge, you put two things at risk to the person who receives that knowledge, and we're going to show you what he's talking about here. We got to look a little bit at Swedenborg's picture of the processes that are going on in our minds. He says that we have both what he calls inner thinking and outer thinking, that there are two levels of thought going on in our mind, and that might seem a little bit strange, but he describes it pretty straightforwardly here in Divine Providence 130. He says the basic state of our thought is that we look from our inner thinking and see things in our outer thinking in a kind of mirror. Because it's already noted, we can look at our own thinking, which can be done only by a deeper level of thinking. We can look at our own thinking. You can say to yourself, why am I thinking that? Which shows there's obviously multiple parts of you if you can scrutinize your own thought behavior with sort of sub-thoughts or meta-thoughts that are behind that. He says, when you're doing that, you're looking from your inner thinking into your outer thinking. So we have this inner and outer thinking, but there's other parts to our thinking mind that Swedenborg talks about. He also says that in our inner thinking, we have freedom. Our inner thinking gives us freedom. There's also rationality, rationality acts as sort of a bridge between the two kinds of thinking and between our freedom in the concepts and the details of life in the outer world. So the two things that he says are at risk when we absorb miraculous or undeniable information is, one, the flow of communication between the inner and outer thinking, and two, the interaction between freedom and rationality. Both of those things can actually be harmed and close to destroyed by the introduction of forced knowledge. And we'll show you how that all plays out within these mechanisms that we've already got going on. All right, so this is how it works. You've got all this system set up, and when things are in the right order, Swedenborg says life from God streams in, and it's able to move through in the proper pattern, which is into the inner thinking, through our freedom and rationality, into the outer thinking, and they're organizing the things we learn and gather as knowledge. And if all that is going well, we get all these processes in the mind, the thinking, the putting things together, the growing, the learning, the changing, that all works. And you'll notice that there is an exchange of information between the inner and outer thinking through rationality. And in the healthy system, there is this communication back and forth along rationality, but it's run by the inner thinking. The inner thinking is instigating and calling the shots. The outer thinking is in more of a supporting role. That's how it's supposed to be for us to move forward and progress spiritually. But if a miracle comes in externally, meaning we see or hear something that's undeniable, Swedenborg says it so takes over the outer thinking. He uses, it's translated in one translation, bewitches the outer thinking, that as you can see, it blocks off rationality, sends messages actually back out of the outer thinking into the inner thinking, which backs up the whole system and actually hinders the flow of life from the Lord into the mind. And when that happens, everything's disrupted, and it degrades the quality of the thoughts that we can have, which in turn degrade the quality of the progress that we can make as we're reformed through thoughts and feelings by God.